Welcome to the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity podcast with Mike Mazie, CEO of Trinity Strategic Wealth, former state senator, and Oklahoma Secretary of Finance. Mike talks with public policy and industry leaders about needed transformative changes to make Oklahoma a top 10 state for people to live, work, and retire.
Hey everybody, it's time for the next podcast of the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity. We've got a great topic today, school choice in regards to charter schools and some very important religious liberty issues that have come into play in the charter school universe in Oklahoma. I'm really pleased we get to talk to my friend Brian Shellem, a successful businessman and CEO of Advanced Automotive, got tagged by Governor Stitt and to serve on the charter school board a couple years back. Actually, I guess it started off with the virtual charter school board. We'll get into that in a second, but he's really working hard on creating more opportunity and more choices for parents and their kids for a great education in Oklahoma. So, Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business background and how you came to be selected to be a member of the virtual charter school board?
Sure. I've been here in Oklahoma for about 22 and a half years. Been in the line of work that I've been in for about coming up on 33 years in January. So we're in the automotive equipment distribution. So we don't work on cars. We sell all the heavy equipment that the people who do work on cars, they use, like car lifts, frame machines. We focus on the collision industry. Been doing that a long time. 22 and a half years ago when we came to Oklahoma, we started our own business, and God's, his provision's been incredible. He's blessed us very much. And in the last couple of years have seen what's been going on within our education system. We had some disagreements during COVID with our own district here in Edmond. And so that's kind of what's got us involved, my wife and I. And we had a lawsuit against Edmond Public Schools in regards to their COVID policies, which we prevailed in district court, and they sued or appealed to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, which we won there. They asked for a rehearing. They got shot down again. So 3 strikes, you're out. And really, it was about non-discriminating against those who did not have the COVID vaccine. That was a real critical issue. My son had suffered through. We have twins that are 17, and so they're seniors in high school this year. But this was during their freshman year, and it just seemed insane. A year and a half after the pandemic had started, we had so much more information. Why we're requiring kids to get this, especially against the advice of their own doctors. And they were basically requiring them to quarantine for 11 days if they may or might have come in contact. And so we said, this is not appropriate. It's truly discriminatory. Those who have a vaccine and don't. And again, we're not anti-vaxxers. I don't want to send that message, but we should be listening to our own children's doctor. Right. And it defied logic. Well, especially at the beginning of a school year, learning loss can happen very rapidly. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that shocked me was when our superintendent said, "I don't understand why parents are so upset." And I said, if you don't understand that, there's a real disconnect then. You may not agree with it, but if you can't at least understand it, there's a problem here. Yeah. Anyway, and again, I have no malice or ill will towards them, but that's kind of how this ball got started in the education realm. Mm-hmm. And, I had a run for office. I was recruited. I had no inclination to do that for the mayoral race, and I came in runner-up. So, long story short.
Very good thing.
Yeah, and so I think God's provision through all this, and met a lot of wonderful people. Then the governor, asked me to serve on this board, which is this brand new board, the statewide charter school board. But then he asked me to fill in on the predecessor board until this board came about. So I served on that board for about eight months, and then this new board started July 1st. So that's kind of how we've come to this position we're in today.
Yeah, let's segue to that. So there's been a lot happening in the board governance world of charter schools. The legislature got, rightfully concerned about some oversight and accountability when it was discovered through the audit of Auditor Cindy Bird that the EPIC charter school founders were really not handling things appropriately, and they were indicted for fraud. And of course, there have been some successes in the charter school world, but a lot of confusion. And so the legislature decided to take a little bit of a different tact and in terms of board governance, and created the new statewide charter school board. So what happened to the old virtual charter school board?
So the old virtual charter school board no longer exists, and that the purview of that one was only for online schools. So the new board is over all online schools and has taken over all the brick and mortar charter schools that the SDE oversaw. Now, there's other authorizers other than the statewide virtual charter school board, but our agency is still responsible for the governance of those that we aren't authorizing as well. So if there's a university or any other public school districts, we have to still make sure that they're in compliance. And there's a full-time staff that does that. Becky Wilkinson is the executive director of the agency, so she runs the day-to-day operations. I chair the board. So I'm not there on the day-to-day operational side of things, but we do set the direction and the tone of where our agency is operating.
And so for our listeners, there's charter schools all across the state. You're from the Edmond area, Oklahoma County. I'm in Tulsa County. If we looked at, say, the new charter school, Tulsa Classical Academy, that's part of Tulsa Public Schools, and so their governance is still part of the Tulsa Public School District versus the Charter School Board. Do I have that right?
That's correct. Yeah, and so that's one of those things where in Oklahoma, I would tell you, we're slightly stifled, and so we're going to be talking, I think, a little bit later in the conversation in regards to policy changes that we're going to be requesting. We're discovering why that is. So currently in law, the applicant, anybody who wants to start a charter school, needs to go to the local school district and ask them to be sponsored. Well, they can turn them down or they can accept them, and this is not really conducive. Basically, it'd be kind of similar if if you're a financial guy and you have to, you want to start a bank, you got to go over to your, I guess, soon-to-be competitor and ask them, hey, do you mind if I start business? And they're like, well, no. Well, we'll let you start, but we're going to oversee everything you're doing, to make sure you're not doing something too crazy. Well, when we look at our education system, in Oklahoma, we are not getting the job done overall. Right. And it seems kind of crazy that we're going to ask the people who aren't doing a great job to make sure that the people who are starting, you got to do a great job, right? Yeah. So again, we're not saying we shouldn't allow those people to sponsor charter schools, but one of the things that are one of our main focus is to allow applicants to come straight to the statewide charter school board. What it does is it gives consistency throughout the state, for one, and it doesn't require them to go, what you could say, to their potential competitor in one area. Now, I think there should be a spirit of cooperation between all schools so that we can move the needle in bettering education. So if someone does something that's creative and wonderful in the charter world, by all means, we should be sharing that with the public schools so that they can implement those things and all students do better.
So are there Senate and House authors yet for that legislation this upcoming session? I know bill filing deadline, or at least bill request deadline, is coming up here in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think it's December 6th, so we don't have authors currently. Literally, we just are creating our template, but
Okay.
we do need to get some authors. Every House member and every senator that we spoke to seems to be very supportive of
Good.
what we're doing, because we've really just about like I said, about 3 weeks ago, we did a research trip. We went to Arizona, where you would find the highest concentration of outstanding performing charter schools in the entire country. So one of the schools that sparked this conversation when doing research of, who are the charter schools that are just doing an outstanding job. We came across, a couple, but one was Basis. And Basis is based in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay.
And out of the top 25 charter schools in the country, they occupy 15 of those spaces.
Wow.
So it's not just a one-off. They have roughly 40 schools, and if you look at the top 50 schools, they're in all 40. 40 of their schools are in that spot. Or I should say the top 100. I mean, it's really incredible, but there's some other phenomenal performers that are just doing an outstanding job. So we took 3 of our board members, 3 of our staff out there to say, what is the environment that allows this to prosper? Right. And really, some of it's the policy. Okay. And it's really probably the biggest thing is what allows these charter schools to have the freedom to do this, and it's consistency in the application process, but it's also taking away hurdles and barriers that allow them to do that.
So we know across the country, charter schools are having, a significant impact on improved education outcomes for students, and giving parents, more and better choices. The Center for Education Outcomes did a study, I think 5 or 6 years, 2014, 2019, over 6,000 schools, and the stats, Brian, are something like 75, 80% of their students are performing at or better than their peer group. So what do you think are the top 1 or 2 systemic functions of these charter schools that are creating what's most important, better outcomes for reading and math proficiency?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because some of my initial conversations with some of these great charters that, like I was saying out there, is what really separates you, right? Same question you're asking. And their first response is, it's the teachers.
Okay.
Well, what's different about your teachers? Well, one of the things they talk about is creating an environment for teachers to really thrive and teach. They said, we want the best teachers. He says, one of the things we do is we try to find people who know the content the best, even though they may not be a certified teacher. So, and one of the example he gave is we might have an astrophysicist or an engineer who is phenomenal at math and understands these math concepts and can explain them better than a traditional model. And so that's part of the reason they're getting outstanding outcomes is they're saying, let's take the best of the people who apply these principles on a daily basis. And that's what, math is one of those things that, translates all over, but are hard concepts for people to understand many times, or young students, and they're getting outstanding results. And then on the flip side, he says, we expect our teachers to teach. They are not counselors. So when they need counseling, we pull them out of the class and get them the counseling they need. Yeah. And so we're taking the load that seems to be putting on a lot of teachers, and we're taking that off because we want the best performing teachers to be teaching, not doing the things that maybe someone else who's going to be either have a higher skill or maybe not doing something that is going to be contrary to accomplishing the goal or the mission. Yeah. So I often equate that in my business. Sometimes I'll get frustrated. I'll ask employee to do a task, and I might give them a list, right? And I say, this is in the order of things I want it done. And I come back, they started at the bottom of the list rather than at the top. And I think that's what they're saying is we're prioritizing the educational needs of the students. We're making sure that's going to happen first. And so I think that's probably one of the key things that's happening in the charter world. It's not just about compliance, it's going, what's the goal of the goal?
Right.
What's the reason we're doing this? And they're focusing on that.
Very important. I married a teacher. Then I had 5 kids, and she sort of retired early. But because of her career and some of her, dear friends over the years that are teachers in both, the public schools and in private schools, the number one frustration is for these, hardworking individuals that care about kids. They want to teach. They they love teaching, and they love, empowering, students to improve and grow and reach accomplishments. But, they're so burdened with, you got to do this, or you got to do this, or you got to, be sensitive to social emotional learning, in the public schools. It's just gotten so out of control. So hopefully the whole charter school movement in the school choice environment creates more and more awareness of that, because it's just totally unconscionable and a moral injustice, in my opinion, that only 21% of 8th graders in Oklahoma can read proficiently. I mean, how are they going to have a successful life, or how are they going to be prepared for life and job if they don't have good reading skills? And so I love what's happening in the charter school world to focus on let's focus on teaching, not burden the teachers with all these other matters. So you're kind of in the center of another issue that's become quite public in the charter school universe, and that's the topic of religious liberty. And one of the schools, St. Isidore of Seville, was denied their charter school application, not by the board, but by the work of Attorney General Gettner Drummond and some of the leftist judges on the Oklahoma Supreme Court, who've basically said, no, a religious-oriented school can't be a charter school because they collect taxpayer dollars. I find all that a little confusing, Brian, because the the United States Supreme Court has ruled in the case just in the last couple of years of Espinoza versus Montana that if you're offering something to the public, you can't deny someone or some entity support just because they're a religious institution. So what's your perspective on all that? And how will maybe the U.S. Supreme Court confront this issue that's going to be major for the charter school universe in Oklahoma?
Well, I think it's really important that people get context of what it is, because the initial response is people who I know I agree with in value go, well, that should be the separation of church and state, right? So what's interesting about this is it's understanding where we're at. We should be awarding contracts for charter schools based on the merit and their ability to educate kids, right? And so when you go back to look at the history, I was not on the predecessor board when the initial contract was awarded to St. Isidore, but I did read the minutes prior to their being awarded. They were denied initially because they needed to improve some of the things in their application. Once they had done that, they were awarded the contract based on their merits and their ability to get the job done. And when we talk about this thing of education, people seem to misunderstand. This is a contract between the state and the service provider, in this case, St. Isidore. And I would also say the same thing we would find in building a road, right? We might have subcontractors doing this. Would we discriminate against, let's say we have the absolute best road builder in the entire state, and if they had a religious affiliation, say, well, you just can't even apply. It defies logic. We want the best roads, right? And so likewise, and when it comes to the contract with the St. Isidore, we believe that they were going to provide an outstanding option for online schooling, and really is to reach more rural and lower socioeconomic areas with the online platform.
Okay.
So the case really stems from the contradiction in the Oklahoma Constitution and the statute versus the United States Constitution.
Okay.
And so if we did not have a United States Constitution, it's easy to say, well, geez, the Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled correctly. But we do. In Article 1, Section 1 of the Oklahoma Constitution, it says it's subservient to the U.S. Constitution and has to be in compliance with all that. Well, we have a First Amendment and a 14th Amendment, and we shouldn't be discriminating just because of someone's religious affiliation. And pretty much that's what we did. They were denied their contract or revoked their contract because of who they are, not what they could do. And that's the crux of the case. The Attorney General argued that once they received a contract, now they are now a state agency or a state actor. And it defies logic because St. Isidore existed prior to, wasn't created by the charter school board or the state. They were awarded a contract, and they still exist today. Their board still exists. And so it does not make them a state agency. And it's a school of choice.
Right. Nobody has to go there. No one's going to be forced into religious instruction. It's a volunteer, association if a parent wants to have their kid in that type of educational setting. So, well, we really love it, Brian, when, clear-eyed, data-driven, success-minded entrepreneurs like Brian Shellem get involved in public service and public policy, because it's small business owners like you and me who know how to get stuff done and can sort of push through some of the illogic of the status quo, and folks who either want to protect their turf or keep doing things the same old way and getting the same old terrible results. So we really appreciate your service to the state, your service to students and parents out there. We look forward to the great work that you and the board are doing. And I think we're going to have you as a panelist for our next Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity Breakfast Forum in December. So you're a great American and a great Oklahoman, and we hope you have a good day. And to our listeners and friends, have an awesome day, and it's a great day to be an American.
Amen. Thank you for having me, Mike.
The Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity is advancing ideas and policy that create growth and prosperity for the people of Oklahoma.